Spring Creek Model Trains is hitting the road and taking scale signs along for the ride. The signs that bring your models to life can now be found in Deschler, Nebraska, and at train shows throughout the country. It's a 3-day event in Ogden, Utah, March 6th, 7th, and 8th as Spring Creek Model Trains heads to the Hostlers Festival at the Ogden Union Station. And to see more of the largest collection of handcrafted scale signs on the planet, head to scalesigns.com. Stop. Don't lay another piece of track on your layout until you have a RailFlow track alignment guide from Oak Hill Model Railroad Track Supply. Whether you're forming curves, testing layout fit, or hand-laying rail, the RailFlow Track Guide ensures accuracy and simplicity. Now available in N, HO, and HON3, RailFlow Track Guides eliminate misalignments and wobbly track lays in both straight and curved track. Order your RailFlow Track Alignment Guide today at ohrtracksupply.com. ATLP Extra is our monthly newsletter delivered right to your inbox each month. Sign up for free at atlpextra.com.
ATLP Rewind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Joining us on this show, coming to us from Bergen, New York, Paul Stamp. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ray, thanks for having me. I got some goosebumps there as you were doing this show intro. I've listened for so long and so excited to finally be on.
It's great having you here on the show and get to see me rattle that all off live. And I'm so excited to be able to talk about your Finger Lakes Railway for a couple of reasons. One is I actually worked in the area that Finger Lakes Railway runs through, so I've seen the railroad before. And then I think I was banging through YouTube and social media and whatnot, and through a bunch of mutual folks through the show, I discovered your Finger Lakes Railway model railroad. I was like, wow, I know what that one is. So really excited to hear about that, how you got to that point, and then we'll talk a bit about your layout and also how you used the prototype to build this. But you've got this YouTube channel. How long have you been doing the YouTube channel?
I've been doing YouTube, Ray, since I was about 12 years old, actually. Long before I was a serious model railroader. There's some videos of me that are now unlisted as a bit of a goober as a 12-year-old doing some stupid things on bikes and things of that nature. So YouTube has been a hobby of mine actually just about as long as model railroading has. And a lot of my passion for the hobby actually stems from the YouTube side of things as well. I love to be able to share content.
Yeah, you definitely have been creating content. And what's neat, I mean, you share a lot about your layout, but you've also shared a lot of the lessons you're learning along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm nothing if not an imperfect modeler. I love to make sure that I'm getting information from every source available, whether it be print media for model railroading, other model railroaders on YouTube, and the modelers here in the local area. And I like to try to take everybody's views into account and kind of amalgamate them into my own way of doing things. And, as much as I like taking advice from other modelers, I also learn from my own mistakes as well, as is very prevalent on my channel, as many people have seen me tear things up and start again a couple of times.
Well, 210 videos, almost 2,500 subscribers, which is an amazing number to achieve. And you got a great following and for good reason. Your videos are very well done. They're professionally produced. Just a very nice job, and great to be able to share your model railroading journey with others, and again share all those lessons that you're learning as you go along.
Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of lessons to be learned, plenty of techniques out there. There's just an incredible variety of different information out there on the internet, and it's fun to try to play around with those things and sometimes even create my own way of doing things, as well as I've done with a couple of my instructional videos, like my how to install ditch lights videos, for example. It's something that I've come up with pretty much on my own and tried to share it, as a step-by-step tutorial for everybody else out there as well.
Well, it's good. And it's great that you're sharing that information. I find myself that when you go through, and it may be even the same techniques, but when it's presented slightly different by other people, we all learn differently and we all see things a little differently. So it's always good to get multiple perspectives on a certain topic, like installing ditch lights or any of these skills or techniques that we're going to need to build our layouts.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to have multiple perspectives for sure.
So you say you started the YouTube channel young, doing some stuff that you may not want to talk about and a little censored and taken off the air. But as far as model railroading, when did you get into the hobby?
So as far as my love of trains is concerned, that I like to say started even before I was born. My parents themselves actually got married on the Arcade and Attica Railroad. They had their ceremony right at the platform that was at Courier's Junction while the train turned around. And so, my love of trains was kind of clandestine from the moment that they said I do, I think. But I popped into the world about 2 years later, and it's been all trains ever since. As a kid, I played a lot with Thomas the Tank Engine toy trains. I had not a lot of people had them at the time, but it was Blue Track Tomy Thomas trains. They were motorized Thomas trains. So I was creating Carpet Kingdoms worth of Thomas and almost kind of making my own obsessions from the age of like 3 or 4. And that was my early indoctrination into trains and not necessarily model trains, but genuinely toy trains at that point. And then actually my first model train set came around the age of 10. My family actually went to the old department store Ames as they were closing down, and my dad got a couple of Bachmann sets on clearance, and I was with them when this all happened. But somehow magically, Santa the following year brought one of those exact sets and put it under the Christmas tree. So that was around the time that I was starting to wonder if Santa was real or not. And that was kind of my confirmation that, Santa either shopped at Ames before they closed down or that, maybe it was my parents that were putting that under the tree. But that set, it was a Union Pacific F unit and Union Pacific caboose, just a circle of the black easy track, nothing too crazy, but Dad insisted we were going to build a 4x8 for it eventually, but that Christmas night, as soon as his head hit the pillow, that box was open, and I had it out on the floor, and I think my mom ended up yelling at me to go to bed that night because I couldn't put it away.
You mentioned Dad was the one that bought it, and Mom and Dad got married on the railroad, and so talk a little bit about, was it Dad's love for railroading or was it Mom's love for railroading? Whose was it?
Mom always supported it, but Dad fed into it big time for sure. Dad and I, as when I was a kid, always used to go sit by the CSX tracks. We'd take trips to Buffalo and just sit by the hump yard at Frontier and just watch them kick cars down the hump. That's some of my core memories, is just sitting there watching just early CSX. There was still some patched Conrail stuff, lots of YN2. I remember patched Conrail and vividly remember some brand spanking new AC 4400s in YN2 paint. And so those are my core memories. Every summer as a kid, we camped a lot, but we also, my birthday's in the summer, so we would try to camp somewhere near a tourist railroad every year and take a train ride every year. So I got to ride like the Cooperstown in Charlottesville. I got to ride the Adirondack Scenic, all these local, well, not local, but New York-based short lines and some of the Pennsylvania ones as well. I got to ride a lot as a kid. That was pretty special.
The railroads and the locomotives that you're mentioning and the paint schemes you're mentioning is starting to prove out my point I keep making on the podcast about, somebody's golden era. And I'm sure somebody at some point was grumbling, this CSX stuff coming on, Conrail's king. Yeah. And then the Conrail, when that was around, somebody was saying, it was New York Central and it was Penn Central. It was these guys and that. That was your golden era, wasn't it?
It was. And I wish 4 or 5 year old Paul would have been competent enough and could afford a DSLR at that point, because it would have been nice to document everything that was happening around that time. But thankfully, the water level route is not an undocumented line at all. There's plenty of media out there that I can go back and reminisce on from those days for sure.
Yeah, somebody was catching your golden era, and there's, like you said, a lot of coverage of that line there running between Buffalo and Albany and beyond. And yeah, that's great. And what's really fascinating to me, again, your dad's interest in it, kind of bringing you along. So getting married on the train, of course, that's a big piece of that. But taking you out and doing these rail fan trips, were they all kind of his idea to begin with, or was it something that you were encouraging him to do? How did that all shake out?
I'm sure it was probably a little bit of both. There was times I'm sure he just was ready to get out of the house and go see some trains. I've got 2 younger siblings as well, so I think it was a little easier for him to make the excuse that let's just take Paul in the truck and we'll go sit down by the tracks for an hour or something like that. But there was definitely times as well where I would ask to go see things as well. Every time I knew we were going into Buffalo, I would immediately ask if we could go sit by the hump yard in Frontier. For some reason, that just fascinated me, just watching them kick cars down the hump. I don't know why, but that's my biggest core rail fanning memory from being a kid.
Yeah, I enjoyed it as well back in the Selkirk days when you could actually stand on Ben's Bridge and look over and see the hump on the other side of the line you're talking about and watch them do that. And unfortunately, the only way I can do that now is to fly the drone up and watch it in 20-minute segments on a video screen. But yeah, it was always fun to watch a hump yard at work, and now there's fewer and fewer of them. But yeah, when you're still one that's working, it's a pretty interesting operation for sure.
Absolutely.
So out with Dad, doing some rail fanning, doing some planned vacations around rail fanning. You got this Bachman set that you got for Christmas. How does the model railroading develop from there?
Right after the Bachman set, not a ton happened. There was frequent trips up to a hobby shop called Ridge Road Station, which was in Holly, New York. It was a really cool hobby shop. They had a massive G-scale layout in there with a ton of Christmas decorations as well. It was kind of one of those Christmas year-round stores, and then a pretty good selection of HO stuff in there as well. So added another F unit to the collection, added a couple more cars and some more track. Quickly I was able to create the carpet kingdoms of Bachman Easy Track instead of the Thomas Tomey stuff. After that, I didn't really start to build an actual layout until I actually hit college age. I got a job in college. I worked my way all the way through college, and had a little bit more disposable income than maybe some college kids did. So without even asking permission, I bought the lumber and started building a 4x8 layout in my early college years in my parents' attic, and that worked for a little while. Just never really got to the point where it was scenic or anything. Just again, Bachman Easy Track, but it was at that point that I bought an NCE power cab. So started getting into DCC, started teaching myself how to do DCC installs and that sort of thing. And then after my first 2 years at a community college, I actually went away for the last 2 years of my bachelor's degree to Mercyhurst University, which is down in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is another really awesome rail fanning hotspot. You've got the CSX main and the NS main that run parallel to each other. So there's a bunch of spots where you can just sit there and watch action on both mains. But while I was in college, I actually built a series of 3 different 2x4 modules and put them up in my college apartment. So I at least had a little bit of a switching layout to be able to mess around with in the apartment. Brought a bunch of my tools and everything I needed to weather, and really started to hone my skills, even further while I was in college. But there is somebody that's was really, really important to my model railroading journey that I met in those last 2 years of college. A gentleman by the name of Tim Anderson. Tim had a home layout in Jamestown, New York. That's about an hour from Erie. And every Tuesday night, Tim would allow myself and a couple of buddies to bring our own stuff over to his layout, flop it all down, completely take over his home layout with all of his home layout, which was all chassis with a bunch of modern equipment, modern Norfolk Southern and CSX. And without having that layout to run on every Tuesday, I'm not sure that I'm this devoted to the hobby anymore. It could have been really easy for me to get bored in those last 2 years of college and move on to something else.
You said that you went idle from, your younger years till you got to college. Do you remember what the re-spark of the hobby was at the college level?
It was actually combinations of things, but ironically, actually, YouTube was a big part of it. After high school, the friends that I was hanging out with, making YouTube videos, doing other things, I didn't really have the time. Our schedules didn't match up to continue making the type of YouTube videos that we were making. And I found myself kind of just sitting on my phone, not doing much a lot of times. And I got bored of that. And I wanted something tangible to do with my hands. And I wanted something to be able to share on YouTube. So model railroading really kind of became that outlet. I started watching model railroading YouTubers. There was a couple of people around my age that were already making videos at that time, particularly Josh Clark, what is his actual channel? Everybody knows NS Modeler 24. That's what it is. And then Cam at Railfan 220 was another one. He models BNSF. And at that point, I think it was Plains Division is what he was modeling. And now I think he's modeling the Montana Division is what it is. Same thing as your buddy Mark Herrick. But and actually, yeah, he was on the show I think at one point. So anybody can go back and check that episode, I'm sure, and know what he's modeling. But those two ended up being a really big inspiration to me to start putting my own work on YouTube.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great when you're growing up in that generation where YouTube has been a big part of it, and the access that you have at your fingertips is, I'm sure folks that are a generation or two older kind of envious that you had that information so early and been able to be influenced by people from afar. And then you mentioned an in-person influence in Tim Anderson. How did you meet Tim?
So I met Tim through a couple of mutual friends. My friends Alex Kolsty and Josh Crane are both local rail fans and model railroaders from the kind of Jamestown, Dunkirk area. So they already knew Tim and were already kind of running on his layout. But, after knowing them for a little while, they had invited me to visit Tim's and bring some stuff with me to run. And Tim couldn't have been more welcoming. Just the first time walking in there with a box full of my own stuff to run. And it was, yeah, sure, no problem. Here's some space over here in Du Bois Yard. Plop it on down here and just run to your heart's content.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, they keep you enthused and give you a chance to run stuff on a bigger layout is always an excellent opportunity. I've done the same. I have a small switching layout, so it's always great to take some equipment over to a bigger layout like the aforementioned Mark Herrick and be able to stretch its legs out a little bit and be able to run bigger equipment on it. Do you still find yourself, or even at that point, you mentioned a couple of the friends were rail fan type guys. I mean, you still out there trackside doing the chasing the prototype?
Not as much as I used to be, but definitely still. I try to take at least one big trip a year. Last year we went down to Scranton and chased the Big Six Alcos down there on the Pocono Main, and then got some Reading Blue Mountain Northern action going up to Procter and Gamble plant that's north of town. The Pime Job is what it's called, but with the rebuilt GP30s and everything, that was a great trip last year. And I still live. I mean, I can practically see the CSX main from my house. I can hear them going by. So anytime I hear of something good coming and I've got a little bit of free time, I'll sneak down to the main and just catch a train or two if I've got the time. So definitely plenty of rail fanning still going on for sure.
Well, excellent. I think the two kind of tie together, and they can tie in together well to, see the prototypes, see how they run, even if it's just mainline running. It's always good to, kind of keep up with that and, have that as an influence into your model railroading. And like I said at the top of the show, I'm really fascinated because you're modeling a railroad that I've seen in pieces before, as in I've caught glimpses of them. I've never had a chance to actually rail fan them, but the Finger Lakes Railway is located, one of the parts that they run. I'm going to have you describe it a little bit better than I can. But I was working in Auburn, New York, staying at the Hilton Garden Inn in Auburn. And sure enough, there they go by. And I was tied up with work, so I could never get out there and really get a good look at them. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this, about the Finger Lakes Railway, and then ultimately, how you got yourself to a point where you said, hey, these are the guys I'm going to model.
Yeah. So the Finger Lakes Railway is a regional line headquartered in Geneva, New York. They've kind of got like a hub and spoke network of fallen flag railroads, all purchased from Conrail. Branching out from Geneva, they've got lines that go to Canandaigua, New York to the west. And then they've got a line, they have trackage rights technically over the Norfolk Southern Corning Secondary down to the town of Himrod. And then they take over some former Pennsylvania Railroad trackage there that runs from Watkins Glen to Himrod and then north to the town of Penn Yan. And then to the east, they also have the former New York Central Auburn Road, which is the line that you would have seen running all the way to Solvay, New York. They do also have a short portion of the Lehigh Valley freight main that goes down to the old Seneca Army Depot in Kennedy, New York. But yeah, it's a great little, kind of funky short line regional that it's all stick rail, all a bunch of really interesting power, and makes for a really, really good operating model railroad, which we can get into later. But as far as my first experience with the Finger Lakes, I actually was on my way out to shoot another one of New York State's legendary Elko roads. When I first experienced the Finger Lakes, I was on my way out to the Mohawk, Adirondack, and Northern, and the buddy that I was with, the aforementioned Josh Crane, ended up saying, "Hey, let's take a quick detour down to Geneva and check out what they've got going on down there. They've got some older GEs on property that are pretty neat." So on our way out, we made the detour down to Geneva, and it was a cold, really, really cold December day. And we pulled in right next to the yard, and one of their former Conrail B-23s was sitting there on yard service and ended up notching up right as we got there, pulling a big heavy string of loaded rebar cars. And I was pretty much hooked on the Finger Lakes Railway as soon as I saw one of those B-23s notch up. Holy cow, it was, a lot of people love Elkos. They love the smoke show. They love the sound. That was me. Was the first time I saw and heard vintage GE notching up the same way. I was hooked. We ended up actually sitting in Geneva so long that we missed the MANN leaving Utica and heading to Rome, and we sat around all day in Utica trying to figure out where the heck the MANN went. But I spent a lot of that time when we were wondering, thinking about, when am I going to make my first trip out to Geneva for a dedicated Finger Lakes rail fanning session? Because that's, I think, where my interest really lies.
How far are you living now from Geneva?
About an hour. So I try to get out there, once or twice a year at least. If something fun's happening, I usually try to get out there for those events. Like they had the private car excursion last year. The Association of Private Cars, AARPCO, I think is the acronym for it. But they had the private cars run an excursion from Solvay to Canandaigua. They sat there for a couple of days and then ran back. So this summer I tried to get out there and chase the westbound movement from Solvay to Canandaigua. Couldn't make it for the return trip, but definitely made it out there for that. And then during the fall, I love to get out there as well because the scenery out there is just absolutely magnificent. That's part of the reason why on the layout I choose to model fall as well.
Excellent. So a detour on a rail fanning trip takes you out to Geneva. You see these B-23s and they're fired up. And tell us about the next steps of learning about the Finger Lakes Railway. I mean, were you all in at that point?
I don't know that I was all in at that point. At that point, when I had experienced the B-23s for the first time, my initial plan, and again, this was pre having my own house and really having the space for a layout, but my plan was to model the Norfolk Southern tier line. I'm sure you know as a rail fan that is an absolutely gorgeous line itself, full of great scenery, and the Class One was alluring for sure, but starting to see the Finger Lakes a little bit more, a couple of trips out there, and it just so happened that that right after my first dedicated trip to the Finger Lakes Railway, Atlas announced that they were releasing 2309 and 2310, which are a pair of former Santa Fe B-23-7s that were in Finger Lakes paint at that point. So I pre-ordered those, and that was kind of the jumping off point. I ended up stumbling on a couple of their Atlas's older run B-23s in Finger Lakes paint on eBay, and picking those up and detailing them out, putting in lock sound and ditch lights and those sort of things. At that point, I was still kind of like, oh, what do I do? Do I just kind of have like a connection with the Finger Lakes? Do I model the Corning secondary along with the Southern tier? Still not having like a permanent place to build a layout. So my eyes were definitely bigger than or my dreams were definitely bigger than a realistic size of a basement. But slowly and surely, my interest started to really shift towards the Finger Lakes itself, and not necessarily the Class One Norfolk Southern. And started collecting more and more of the Finger Lakes equipment, selling off more of my Norfolk Southern stuff. And the nice thing is, half the freight cars that I already owned were the right ones for Finger Lakes, because half the traffic on Norfolk Southern is just interchange for Finger Lakes. So that was nice as well. But it kind of happened over time. But by the time we were ready to move out of our rental house that we were in and buying our first house, it was the Finger Lakes for sure. That was what was being modeled in the basement.
I've found that, at least for me personally, nothing will cement you into a railroad more than going out and seeing something and then going either on eBay or on the internet or wherever and being able to find that model. Like,
Yep.
it's like, okay, now I can actually hold it in miniature form in my hand, which is really
absolutely
neat. It's like, yeah, that really, it's probably what brought me to the New England Central Railroad was the same thing. I saw them and then went on the internet and it was Atlas GP38s in New England Central paint. I was like, I got to own that. Like, I got to have it.
absolutely.
And it sounds like for you as well. Talk about learning about the Finger Lakes Railway and how you started to understand more about their operations beyond just what you saw in Geneva.
Well, thankfully, there's a pretty substantial Facebook group for the prototype itself. So anytime there was questions about what was running on any given day, there was a bunch of people out there ready and willing to provide information as to what was going on. So anytime I had free time and was willing to go out to the prototype, which I did a lot more prior to building the layout, I would just pop on and say, hey, what's going to be running Monday or what's going to be running Friday? I've got the day off and looking to come out. And, people would let me know, hey, it's the Solvay turn runs every day. So that's easy. And then the Canandaigua turn and a lot of the other runs are once every few days. So I could go out and time my visits just right so that each time I could rail fan a different part of the line, start to understand, the operations schedule based on, the information in that group, and really start to compile a really big list of really big collection of reference photos for building a layout for sure.
Tell us a little bit about the railroad and kind of what they do. Who are they interchanging with and who are they taking care of out there? Who are their customers?
Yeah, so they've got a really good mix of customers, honestly. They've got a lot of grain customers right in Geneva. There is DeLong, which is a big grain loadout. It's kind of surprising the middle of the Finger Lakes, they're doing the amount of loading of rail cars right there that they are. There's a series of absolutely massive grain bins there, and they load out, I don't know, probably 12 to 14 cars a day, something like that. There's daily service out there from the yard. Right behind that, you've got Seneca Foods, which is one of their biggest customers as well, getting a bunch of canning supplies in by rail. So Geneva itself is a really big hub of activity. And then as you spread out, as you go west, there's a bunch of customers in Canandaigua. That one's a big plastic pellet receiver, so injection molding company called Pactiv. And then the biggest customer itself is actually in Solvay, New York. So right at the end of their line, that customer is called Westrock, and they are a cardboard recycler, cardboard product manufacturing as well. So that's their biggest customer by volume, and it's actually, unfortunately, not even on my layout because I don't have the space to do the run from Geneva to Solvay much justice. But as far as interchange partners, they interchange with both big local class ones. They interchange with CSX in the town of Solvay at Solvay Yard. So CSX runs a local over from DeWitt, I believe, on a daily basis to Solvay, and they interchange right there. And then Norfolk Southern actually interchanges in Geneva, New York, because they still own the Corning Secondary, which is a line from Gang Mills up to Geneva itself. That's another former New York Central road as well. So they run daily service from Gang Mills up to Geneva and interchange the rest of the cars that Finger Lakes needs through that run.
And where is the Corning Secondary going to? Where does that tie in the NS system?
So it ties into the Norfolk Southern Tier line in Gang Mills,
Okay.
New York, and then it runs up the west side of Seneca Lake. It's an absolutely gorgeous run. There's a lot of that stretch that runs right along the lake. One of the feature scenes on my layout is the Corning Secondary running along Seneca Lake. Absolutely gorgeous stretch running through some pretty famous towns like Watkins Glen, home of the big road course NASCAR track. And then from there kind of hugs the side of the lake coming up to Geneva.
And what would I have seen them doing in Auburn? What would they have been up to in that area?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of other industries in Auburn itself. Auburn has a yard, so it's just kind of a little tiny 3-track yard in Auburn. They move a lot of rebar in gondolas, these really neat gondolas that have some custom bulkheads that I've actually scratch built. The customer there's the name is Nucor Steel, so they move a lot of rebar out of there. There's also a glass bottle manufacturer, Owens, Illinois, just outside of town. So you can model a lot of the two-bay traffic that they get hauling in silicate for glass bottle manufacturing. And then there's also a little industrial park kind of right across Route 5 in Auburn that actually goes by what used to be an old Lehigh Valley roundhouse that unfortunately burned in the early 2000s, and then ends up at a couple of customers where there's a transload siding and an agricultural supplier that gets fertilizer every once in a while. And then the only other customer there in Auburn is Auburn Metal Processing, which is a scrap dealer. They actually, if you look at Google Maps, they were breaking down rail cars and putting them in gondolas at one point. So pretty interesting that I could potentially model old rail cars at end of life being broken down and put into the scrap gondolas.
So with all of these, it sounds like a great variety of industries. No wonder why it was attractive to look at modeling Finger Lakes. I mean, you talked about, you have paper, you have plastics, you have a variety of different things that you're going to be able to service with that railroad.
Yeah. And with that variety also comes a variety of rail cars that's really cool too. I'm not a huge rail car nerd, but I've got some friends that love the Finger Lakes. And one of the things that I always heard from modelers was, you can't model the color. Everything's gray. You don't need to have all these crazy colors. And one of the things that stood out on the Finger Lakes was the just crazy amalgamation of bright colored cars that they have. All these fallen flag box cars. There's former Erie Western box cars rolling around out there. There's former, patch outs of all these different short lines. There's actually a fleet of captive service box cars. So they've reached the end of their interchange life that run from West Rock in Camillus, New York, to West Rock in Solvay. And this is just this crazy pool of really old, really unique box cars. DeLong gets a crazy mix of just former Santa Fe cylindrical hoppers, former CNW hoppers. There's just this amazing variety of colors. So there's some gray in there too, but man, is there a unique amount of rolling stock to be modeled on this little regional.
Yeah, that's a very attractive portion of a railroad to be able to do that, to have some unique rolling stock, and again the variety of industries that it provides, and then a locomotive roster that's really neat too, and a scheme that's very familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. The B23-7 roster, all a bunch of old vintage GEs. There's just a crazy mix of former owners as well. I mean, obviously they're all secondhand. There's a good mix of former Conrail units. There's a local flavor for you. There's a former Providence and Worcester unit that, unfortunately, at this point is unfortunately down for the count long term. It derailed 2 summers ago on the line to Watkins Glen. Apparently, one of the maintenance away crew forgot to derail on the main line, and it tipped over on its side, and that was the end of that unit, unfortunately. But it was a really neat unit in the time frame that I model it. It had this really crazy paint scheme where the long hood was all still Providence and Worcester colors patched out with a Finger Lakes logo, but the cab was black. So it was just kind of this Frankenstein looking locomotive that was really cool. And then there's, of course, the former Santa Fe units that ran around in Santa Fe paint, just patched out for Finger Lakes for a really long time. Technically, my modeling era is those units in Santa Fe paint as well. I do have them in the New York Central-esque lightning stripe scheme that is the corporate paint scheme that I enjoy, but it's really the hodgepodge of paint schemes that really is what I enjoy about the Finger Lakes. And then on top of the B23-7 roster, there's also a big variety of former roads in the GP38 fleet, along with one GP9 that's left. And then in my modeling era, there's also a pair of CEFX Bluebird scheme SD45 car bodies. That was a big reason why I decided on the Finger Lakes as well. I really loved that CEFX paint scheme, and to be able to model those SD45s was a real treat as well.
And I know you've done a video on the fleet that you've modeled of the Finger Lakes Railway, and we'll share links to that on our website, aroundthelayout.com/143. So now you've learned about the Finger Lakes, and it sounds like you needed a little bit, make a real estate acquisition to make this all happen. Talk about your steps as you start to model the Finger Lakes Railway.
Yeah, so my wife and I bought our house in 2020. Funny enough, the house that we're in, I'm actually the fourth generation of my family to own it. My great grandparents built it as their kind of retirement home. It's just a simple 2-bedroom ranch. Because it's a 2-bedroom ranch, the great thing is there's a big, wide open basement underneath. And when it was time to start building a layout, I had pretty much free reign of the basement. I could have taken the whole thing if I wanted to. I did get a comment from my wife at one point that was, "Are you sure you need the whole thing?" So I didn't take the whole thing, although most of it is just used for storage now. But I took over just over half of it. And the space itself, the layout sits in about 22 by 24 is the dimensions, I believe. So it's a pretty good space.
Is that kind of a blessing, or would you rather have had all that real estate, or did that in sense kind of help you?
Well, the temptation is always still there to add on for me. So I don't know that it's necessarily a blessing as much as it is just a constant source of temptation. I made the decision originally not to finish the basement before I started building. And one of the things that I'm constantly going back and forth is man, I could finish the basement, I could rotate the layout 270 degrees, and then have the space that I need to model more of the Auburn Road without losing anything that I currently have. So it's constantly a source of temptation to kind of add on. But I've got other side projects that happen now. People may have seen I'm now starting to build some Fremo modules as well, based on another local short line. So the space does come in handy to have just the empty space for sure.
So after deciding on this 22 by 24 space and what you were going to, where you're going to put the railroad, talk about putting together a plan to model the Finger Lakes Railway, and kind of what were your decisions as you decide what you can and can't include in this space?
The disadvantages of buying a house that your family's lived in for 3 generations is that it also comes with 3 generations worth of stuff in the basement. So I had a solid, I don't know, probably year and a half where I was just cleaning out the basement and then doing preparation to the space, because I did add some additional lighting before I broke ground. But I had a year and a half to plan while I was doing that. The track plan of the layout itself. So, I took the layout into AnyRail. That was my preferred software. And, I probably had close to 15 different iterations of what I would do with the space prior to breaking ground on the layout. And then after breaking ground, even, I knew that the exterior of the layout was going to be basically the same footprint, but I was still track planning as I was building bench work. What I ended up with is kind of a good mix of the whole footprint of the railroad. I've got Geneva Yard as my hub, and then I've got the Auburn Road running west to Canandaigua on a center peninsula in the room, and then the Corning Secondary runs around the running west out of the yard, technically south, railroad south out of the yard, and then down one wall of the basement to Himrod Junction, where the Finger Lakes trackage picks up again and then runs to Penyan, as well as, if you keep on the Corning Secondary, going to Gang Mills Yard as well on that side. And then running east out of Geneva, we've got the run out to Auburn on the Auburn Road. So lots of trackage, and during an op session, usually I can have a max of 12 operators if I'm running a 2-man crew, but there's 6 jobs running, and I run a 2-day session, so everybody gets to run a different part of the railroad during each day of the op session.
So as you're putting this plan together, were there certain sections of the Finger Lakes Railway that you couldn't include that you wish you could?
Yeah, there's a big one that I really, really wish that I could have included, and that's the southbound run out of Himrod Yard to Watkins Glen. It's probably one of the most gorgeous stretches of the railroad. There's an absolutely magnificent shot where the Finger Lakes goes over a trestle over Lenora Falls, which is just this beautiful scene where there's a potential to be modeled there. That's you could do like a Florida to track level scene of this massive waterfall with the Finger Lakes running over the trestle over the top of it. And then Watkins Glen itself is there's 2 big customers down there, both salt industries, US Salt and Cargill Salt, and both of them are right on the banks of Seneca Lake. So it's a very, very beautiful stretch of railroad. But for me, the flow of my layout really doesn't make sense to put that in, unfortunately. I have the space. There's this whole other half of the basement that could be taken up by trains, but the flow of the track plan that I've got just doesn't lend itself to it, unfortunately.
Tell us about some of the industries that you're able to include in this plan.
On each of my lines, I try to model about 3 to 4 industries on each of them. Obviously, on the prototype, there's quite a few more on each of these lines. The Finger Lakes is a very robust network of industries, but just for the Canandaigua line, for instance, there's 4 customers on the line. You start at Phelps Junction, where there's actually technically 2 industries. One is Phelps Supply, which is a fertilizer dealer. They take in covered hoppers and tank cars worth of fertilizer, mostly in the spring, sometimes in the fall, for farmers that are getting one last load of fertilizer down on the fields prior to the snow falling. And then on that same siding is also Shepherd Grain, which is a grain loadout. They do a lot of soybeans, and they do soybeans in and soybeans out, depending on the time of the year. And the next industry on the line is DeLong in Clifton Springs. It's another grain loadout. They take a whole bunch of cars in there, not quite as big as some of the other grain loadouts. So on my layout, it only handles two cars per job. And then after that, you get into the town of Canandaigua, where there's 2 big industries. The first one is Canandaigua Wine, which gets tank cars worth of corn syrup for the production of wine. And then the biggest industry in terms of size on the prototype is Pactive, which is a plastic pellet receiver for injection molding. And then on my layout, ironically, it's actually the layout that takes up the least amount of space. There's just a little 3-track yard that unfortunately is not really that representative of what's out there. I took my drone up this past fall and kind of flew it around Pactive to kind of get an understanding of what that industry was really like. And I don't have it modeled nearly as accurately as I would like to now, having flown my drone around. It's just a 3-track yard with a little bit of storage and 1 unloading track. But that's kind of an idea of what each of the lines has to offer. 3 to 4 industries. Keeps everybody busy for about an hour and a half per op session. And then we do a day 2 within the op session, and everybody gets to go out and experience a different job on the layout.
So it sounds like you've got a really great variety of industries on your layout, and some really unique ones, especially the winery, which is, kind of a big thing up there in the Finger Lakes region with all the vineyards and very popular industry. So neat that you've included that. When you look at your layout and you compare it to the prototype, how true do you feel to the prototype versus your layout? Would you call yourself a prototype modeler? Would you call yourself proto freelance? How would you describe yourself?
Yeah, I'd call myself a prototype modeler. I mean, I try to model my railroad as close as I possibly can to the real prototype, down to, even specific reporting marks. I document all of the cars that I get and patch out a lot of what I have rolling stock wise to match the exact reporting marks and everything that I've seen. And it's funny. I actually, at one of my most recent op sessions, actually had a couple of Finger Lakes Railway employees at the op session. And my question to them at the end was, so did this feel enough like work without actually feeling like work? And they said yes. And I was like, perfect, mission accomplished. That's exactly what I want this to feel like. I want it to feel like the real thing without it feeling like the work of the real thing.
Yeah, that's definitely a good stamp of approval, and I'm sure they've been, great resources for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been really great to bounce ideas off of, understand what happens at each of the industries as well. As far as the actual practices that they use at each of the industries, and they're super nice guys as well, for sure.
So what percentage would you say of completion your layout is at right now?
I'd say it's really only at about 25% as far as like scenicking is concerned. I've got all the bench work down. We're at 100% as far as bench work and track work are concerned. but scenery wise, we're only at about 25%. And, this sort of layout of this size, there's this whole debate about small railroads and big railroads, and what you should build in your basement. If you're going to build a big railroad like this, you got to understand that it's a lifetime project. So I do, always fully go into this understanding that I'm at 25% now, and it's going to be a lifetime to finish the other, 75%.
Well, I'm still in the theory, really the belief that a railroad's never complete. So 99% is about as well as you can. We've heard modelers say, I'm done. There's nothing else. And then the next thing you know, they're doing something. They're changing a building, or so it's never completed. But yeah, it's great. And you've got plenty of time. You're a young gentleman who has got some time to get this done and right, but you're on the right path. What would you say is your favorite part of your layout?
It's going to sound cheesy, but my favorite part of the layout is really just being able to share it with others. As far as like a physical part of the layout, it's currently the Seneca Lake scene, because that's the most complete part of the scenery. It's gorgeous, but as far as like my favorite part about the layout, it's being able to share it with others through YouTube. And then, through my local NMRA division, having people over to visit and operate, seeing the look on their faces when they walk down to the basement and see what I'm building.
Yeah, you're part of the Lakeshores Division, correct?
Yeah. I'm actually, as of October, I'm the assistant superintendent. And Ed, who you just had on a couple of weeks ago, is the superintendent. We're excited to be bringing the Lakeshores ever forward. It's already was a growing division, and I think we're going to continue to grow it even more.
Yeah, well, you're definitely in a great division, and it's all part of a great region, being in the Northeast region, which is just an absolutely fantastic region. And of course, your neighboring Central New York division is another great one. Yep. I always enjoy going out and running layouts in the CNY area. I've definitely got to make myself get a little bit farther west and get to your layout and see the fine folks that are between, I would say, Rochester and Buffalo, and be able to check all of that out as well. So, yeah, some really great modeling going out there, and you've got a great division. It sounds like you've got a lot of great folks that are helping contribute towards your layout and out there running it and giving you information. And being close to your prototype, again, is such an asset to be able to see what they're up to and be able to go and explore those lines and get more inspiration, and then have employees come to your operating sessions. That's just an added bonus to that.
Yeah. That was icing on the cake for sure, to get the verification that what I'm doing is pretty darn close. It was certainly a treat.
Well, it was awesome catching up with you today and hearing about your model railroading journey from a age 10 and a Bachmann UP set all the way now to a prototype of the Finger Lakes Railway, which is a really unique railroad that you've been able to emulate in a HO scale way. And really looking forward to keeping up with you on your YouTube channel. Again, we'll share all the links to that. We'll also share some photos of Paul's layout all on our website, aroundthelayout.com/143. Paul, thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story.
Yeah, absolutely, Ray. It was great to be on, and like I said, it was a dream come true. Love the podcast, and really was fun to be on.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's episode, check out past shows, and much more on our website, aroundthelayout.com. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at aroundthelayout.com/crew. Follow us on social media, aroundthelayout.com/social. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.